Hello and welcome to the center of your entertainment galaxy. This is your GM in the Great Barrier, welcoming you to a very special session of Star Trek Adventures Aegis, because we are doing a mid-season Q&A. For those of you that are joining us live here today, you may of course send in your questions in the chat. For those catching in the archive, I'm sad to say you missed the postings here, but we will be doing more of these again, both for Aegis and Broken Sword, probably near the end of the respective seasons that we are currently in. So if there are ever questions you want to drop for a future Q&A special, you're welcome to, of course, leave a comment in the video or otherwise keep an eye on the social media, relevant social media here. There's, of course, mentions in the description here. For those on the Twitch, you should check the About section. I can be found on Twitter at GM_barrier for as long as the bird site still flies. Then I can also be found at Mastodon. I believe that's at at GM in the Great Barrier with all underscores between them at dice.camp. So feel free to check those out. Give us follows there, help you keep up to date. For YouTube, there should be posts that go out as well in advance of the special, at least a week in advance of the Q&A, so you can always drop questions there. But in any case, we are joined today by three of our crew members from the Aegis. Uh, Going in sort of decreased rank order, we have the ship's armory officer and Dorian military attaché, Yula Sheara, or as known by the players, Craig. Say hello there, Craig.
Hello there, Craig.
Excellent. Points for, I guess that's momentum for specific, or following specific instructions. Um, then we have the Aegis's chief engineer, Lieutenant Cmdr Aleska Romanov, played by Brian here. You want to say?
Hey, yeah, how are you doing?
Yeah, yeah. Let them know how you're doing there, chat. Um, and then, of course, we have everyone's favorite Vulcan rogue here, Soral, as played by Felix today.
Hi.
Uh, so we are all here, and we are joined by a special guest, a familiar voice for those of you that watch the Broken Sword campaign. We have Joe here, who is going to be guest hosting. Welcome on board, Joe.
Pleasure to be safely transported on board through time and space to this fine ship.
Oh, you have no idea. Well, in any case, this is where the GM is going to take a little bit of a step back, as Joe will be leading the bit of interviews today. So, um, of course, answer questions as they come here. So let's get into this. It's your show now.
All right. So, Star Trek Aegis. What does God need with a starship? Let me silence my phone so we don't hear Groot going off every time somebody texts me, because that happens. What does God need with a starship? This has been an ongoing streaming Saturday campaign, from what I hear, for quite a while. It happens from 1 p.m. Eastern to, how late do you guys usually go?
Generally, we'll go up to 4 p.m. Eastern, or I believe the translation for GMT would be 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. Anyone feel free to correct me on that if I've mixed up the times there.
Time zones always throw me off too. When you got players from all over the world, it's fun.
Yeah.
Since I'm a player in the Broken Sword campaign, which is the Klingon-focused Wednesday evening game, I am fairly new to the universe that has been created for Aegis, and which is in part why we are here. To find out more about our storyteller, the game master in the Great Barrier, the players, and the universe that they are playing in. We'll pull back the curtains a bit and talk to the folks behind the scenes, and just have an all-around fun Q&A session here. We'll start with the ship. You don't see too many, if I remember right, that is a Olympics class?
It is actually the Daedalus class, which is the
Ah,
earliest forebearer of the spherical hull option within Starfleet, and certainly I think the earliest canon reference. I know that the model first made its canonical appearance in Deep Space Nine. Cisco had one mounted there. FASA may have done some stuff with it before. I think they had some things with spherical hulls themselves.
Yeah, there's a few variants of the Daedalus, I believe, as well from FASA.
Yeah.
Wasn't
I
there an
was-
earlier appearance with the Next Generation?
That's the Olympic class. That's why I thought it was the Olympic, because the Olympic class is what Crusher was on during I think the last episode.
Yeah, technically you were both correct in a sense. Because yes, the Olympic class did show up during All Good Things, the USS Pasteur, but the USS Daedalus was alluded to in an episode of The Next Generation. I don't remember the exact one, but it involved the basically alien energy being prisoners that were passing themselves off as the crew of the long lost starship Daedalus. They possessed Data and O'Brien, maybe Worf. I don't quite remember. Someone will correct
You know,
me.
Star Trek out of context sounds wild.
Yes, it absolutely is.
So is the ship called Aegis then? Where does the Aegis come into play?
Yes, so the starship itself is named the Aegis. That's more like hard E sound there properly. It was commissioned. Let's see, going back to my notes on the Aegis, I believe that in the timeline I had set up, the hull for the Aegis was actually partly under construction with the initial batch in the 2140s. Yeah, it had started construction in 2141 um, as other ships of the class were being deployed. It was kind of lower on the priority list, and the Daedalus fleet had actually been mothballed before before it was properly commissioned or even fully completed. Um, the events of recent years in game. This is set during 2154, where so basically we started during the fourth season of Enterprise. Very specifically, for those familiar with the show, it is happening concurrently with the Augment arc, or the time where Brent Spiner shows up for a few episodes. This is happening it starts at the same time as that, but obviously unrelated. So during this time, though, basically, the Aegis is being recommissioned as part of a fairly extensive build-up of both Starfleet and Mako's capabilities. This is just coming after the Xindi crisis and after uh, several major confrontations. There's been a bit of a shakeup at the command level as well, to where there's actually more of an effort towards forging Starfleet and Mako into sort of a joint service, such to where you might even see Makos trained for proper stellar service, or you have Mako officers in traditionally Starfleet roles, as it were.
That's really awesome. So how did your adventure here start? I know you mentioned before we started the whole recording that not everybody here has been here from the start. But how did you kind of get going with the adventure itself? Kind of some high points that you've had.
Well, I will say this was the first campaign that I actually recruited for to go online. I tried to take some of the best practices I've picked up over the years and try to forge it as best I could for for a streaming run here, and we got a very good batch of characters. A lot of competition for some of the roles. Certainly, there were quite a few engineers and tactical officers that aspired to the role. Um, Very few people wanted the big chair, but I feel extremely lucky with the run of people that have been in that role or were even considered there for a time. Um, we started, I think, recruiting near the end of January this past year, and then the campaign pretty much we went through February and part of March getting everything set up. I had some real life circumstances that made starting the campaign just a little bit tricky, but we got through that, and yeah, the campaign got to a start in March of this year, 2020, for those catching up in the archive at some distance. So it was quite a bit of work. There was maybe one thing that I really ought to have done beforehand that didn't wound up happening, and for everybody that's made it through the first episode of Aegis, I apologize that I was broadcasting from an ion storm at the time. That's me learning OBS a little bit, but Craig was nice enough to hang with me when I figured that out a bit later, and all the other sessions have looked great.
So, what was the recruiting process like for your players? Tell us a little bit about that.
Well,
It came down to who sent you the most money in the end, I believe. So,
yes, capitalism. Now, I did start off, of course, with some invites out to. There were a few people that I wanted to give an early shot for this. I have some players in the campaign that I have gone with for quite some time, and I have seen their strengths as role players, how readily they take to their characters, and not that anyone needs to do especially well with the system, but that works too. Or there's the kind of fire forged type experience. So there were on some games that I personally managed, one of which ended earlier in this year as well. I wound up giving sort of the early access to. Otherwise, it was pretty much, campaign advertisement and application forms full spread, targeting all the Discords and the subreddit and pretty much anywhere else I could think of. I like to see when it came to the recruitment process. I like to see what people gave me as pitches. I was basically looking for something that, while not too long, I wanted to have the sense that people had a decent idea of the characters, or like a general sense of the mold. I suppose the way to think about it would be, I was looking for people to say, not just including a species, or not just including a role, which a lot of that I did get, but maybe like I've had pitches for like a Vulcan who's not afraid to get a little illogical, or a Trill character who is like just kind of getting out in the world and wants to, like, the symbiote itself is also just getting out in the world, so it really wants to learn things.
You mean it's looking for a trilling life in the stars?
The puns. But yes, that post would have definitely earned an interview. So yeah.
I'll comment on this from the other side. I saw the ad and I thought it was interesting because most people like I talk to, aren't interested in Star Trek set in the Enterprise era, and I thought it was pretty cool because I always felt like there was a lot of potential stories there that could easily be going on in that time period. So I liked the pitch that you put out.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember exactly what that looks like when it went out.
You were pretty clear about what the campaign was about. That was one thing that jumped out at me, and I knew immediately when it was set. Although I hadn't watched I watched Enterprise at the beginning of COVID-19. Just like I wanted stuff to watch, so I decided I'd watch Enterprise again. And that's about, was a year or two after that I bumped into your ad.
Hmm.
And it was pretty cool. You were pretty clear about when it was set.
Yeah.
What about the other crew here? What was your experience with finding the ad or getting reached out to and deciding to join up?
Well, myself and Felix were in a game that was being run by Zach here, which was a post TNG Voyager, that era game, and that was coming naturally to its end. So yeah, Zach brought up that he was putting together a game, and I always quite liked in the Enterprise era, wish the show had been a little bit better. But yeah, there's always plenty of potential in storytelling there. So that's what grabbed me.
Oh, don't we all?
That's why I'm kind of appreciative, and we'll get to talking about Star Trek itself later, but if there's time. But that's why I'm really appreciative that Strange New Worlds kind of it feels a lot more classic Trek than Discovery, which was iffy. But yeah, between Enterprise and the original series, you don't see a lot of games set in this time period, even though there's a wealth of story from the books, from different nods in the episodes themselves. It's really fun to see that time period. That's what drew me into the Broken Sword stuff, because it's like, oh, this is an era that's not talked about at all. Plus, it's from the Klingon perspective. So, how did you come up with the time and place for, like, the era for this setting, and kind of those initial ideas for the game?
Well, one of these days I'll be able to give you the complete answer to that, but for now, as best I can say is that when it came to Aegis, just in general, I do really enjoy this era, and I kind of have to second Craig's statement there on how this is an interesting era to explore, and how we wish that Enterprise had been able to do a little more. Uh, I it like my other long-running campaign that I've been doing off stream these past several years uh, has been actually adjacent to this era, or about a decade ahead, roughly, of what we've been doing in this campaign. And yeah, it's been great to work in that toolbox. So I think that it's it's great to explore the dynamics of power, how the interplay of different groups here. In particular, with Aegis, we've had more of an excuse to deal with the most underutilized of the core species. We've had quite a bit of Tellarite-related adventures, and I dare say we have more Tellarite content to deal with in the future. So that in itself has been quite nice and rewarding. Uh, Otherwise, I do also like the challenges that come with it. This is an era with much less of the creature comforts that than what you would expect to have even in TOS era, let alone the next generation. So it makes some challenges work a little bit better. I think in particular, it is the way that uh, makes a very particular horror concept I had work most effectively. I think is that it is best suited to this era. And for those that have been following, then you will recall the two-parter "Be Still, Thy Gentle Shade."
So, thinking about your game and stuff like that, what have been some of the high points story wise? You just mentioned one, kind of briefly. What have been some of the high points that you've experienced through the course of play, whether it be story, whether it be live chat, interactions, stuff like that, or even just on a personal level?
Oh, that is a very good question. Um, so I would say just in general, being able to get out there and to an extent just to have people that are willing to drop in and watch, let alone the occasional chat, is something. It's more of a stirring endorsement than I guess I thought I was going to get or was necessarily prepared for. It's nice to see that people do indeed want to catch the stories here. Um, I'm still I think I'm still probably most proud of how the one horror game came out. I also I did rather I rather liked where we came from with the pilot. Produ- uh, Production streaming issue aside at the very beginning of that. Um, and then let's see. Uh, there have been other like little moments along the way where character beats that have come up that have been great, but I think much of the best is still to come with this, and I'm very eager to see what that goes. But that's the omniscient GM perspective. I think that honestly, it may be a better question for the players to this point. See what they've liked.
Well, I quite enjoyed the away mission to what's it called? Where we lost all kind of radio contact with the ship, and there was a cave and
Terra Nova?
Terra Nova.
Nova, that's it. Yeah. Yeah, I quite enjoyed that. It's very much a sense of trying to keep things together while the Aegis got back at some point.
Ah, yes, Craig's favorite task, the dealing with the chains of command.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. Because it just felt ever so slightly just out of control all the time, which is great.
Yeah, no, nice to ride by the seat of your pants. Well, what about the rest of you? Brian, you have any particular favorites from early in the series so far?
I definitely liked the horror episode. That was really well done, and I enjoyed it. And I've really enjoyed pretty much all the games. Yeah, I definitely like Terra Nova. Terra Nova was very challenging. And I liked the way you introduced my character. So those would be some big highlights.
I suppose it's still a little early to ask you, Felix, because this is only the you've been in for only half the adventures, and one of them was a very abrupt introduction, I suppose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I did enjoy getting to wreck an engine on the Terra Nova arc.
Ah, yes.
Was that by choice or was that by die rolls?
They wanted a ship that is warp 2 capable to arrive there with a speed of like warp 3 or 4. And I made that happen. That the engine doesn't like that, it's really not my fault.
How much experience have you all had with Star Trek Adventures before playing in this game?
Well, me and Greg were part of one of Zach's earlier games. I don't know if Greg had any experience before that, but that's my entire portfolio of Star Trek
very
Adventures.
limited experience before that. It was essentially the first. Yeah, the Wake, I think it was called, was the first campaign of Star Trek Adventures I was involved in.
Yeah. Well, I guess, I mean, the biggest experience before that is shout out to Shield of Tomorrow. Which was for me really like, oh, there is a Star Trek RPG out there.
Yes,
Continue.
watching that was very good.
Absolutely. Yeah. Eric Campbell and the whole cast and crew of that series did provide quite the bit of guidance for like I'd say not just like it was a great introduction, I think, to the series, to the engine. You know, one could pick up a fair number of mechanics that way, and it was on its own just a very nice piece of Trek-related work there.
Yeah, I did play one other series, but it unfortunately had to stop because of scheduling commitments. It's a shame.
What other systems have you played before?
Bit of everything, kinda. Shadowrun, Call of Cthulhu, D&D, Legend of the Five Rings, Vampire.
Legend of Five Rings. Oh, I love Legend of Five Rings.
Oh yeah, it's fantastic.
Werewolf the Apocalypse, Pendragon. Gosh, what else have we been playing? Savage Worlds. Very recently started a cyberpunk game using that system. Oh, and of course, Star Wars using the what is it? Whatever system the Fantasy Flight came up with for that.
The special dice and stuff like that.
With the special dice.
I think it's like there's several different ones. There's like Age of Rebellion. There's it's kind of the different era, kind of like Star Trek is, but it's different eras of the universe. Yeah, it's the Fantasy Flight version. That one's fun.
We just in fact just completed quite a long running campaign of that being Rebel Pilots. So yeah, that's good.
Mr. Game Master, what about you?
Oh, a fairly decent array. Outside of the long stretch of time where I've been GMing this system, I'd gotten to start properly with actually Dragon Age. the Dragon Age system, some Shadowrun, a bit of I dabbled in a very slight bit of Pathfinder and 5e. Most recently, I was in a very brief stint with a 3.5e game. Those it's all been interesting. Just either games ran out or scheduling conflicts once again came up, and yeah, there was nothing further to it.
So has Star Trek Adventures been your favorite, or are there others that you find kind of going for everybody here? If there's others that you prefer over Star Trek Adventures?
I'd say STA is my favorite system right now. I feel like it works for it works very well, even with if you have shorter windows to run a game in. Because I run a couple STA games as well. So, and I played in a couple before this one, but this is the longest running campaign I've been in. So, I think the engine for the system is very good.
It's a difficult question, isn't it? I mean, most systems have like pros and cons, but I kinda have a special place in my heart for all these systems that let you gather more dice. It's just like attribute 5 dice, skill 3 dice, or 8 dice, and you just roll over a threshold. It's kind of rolling a mountain of dice. It's just something very special.
Yeah, that's true. That is a lot of fun.
I think I prefer the Star Wars system, which I think is actually called, the generic version's called Genesis. And yeah, it's good. I think it allows for good storytelling, and it's once you kind of get used to it, I think it's fairly quick to pick up.
You mean the Fantasy Flight system?
Yes.
Yeah, it's an interesting engine. I've played that, and I've also played D6 Star Wars, but unfortunately D6 wasn't around long enough for them to really be able to adapt to all the material that came out since it was there. I ran a Fantasy Flight. I ran a couple modules for that for some friends before COVID. It was interesting. I enjoyed it.
I like there's elements of different systems that I like the character creation in Palladiums and Cthulhu, Call of Cthulhu. I love those, just because it feels like by the end of the mass of creating your character, you actually intimately know them. With the detriment of Call of Cthulhu, it's not a matter of if you go insane or die, it's when your character is going to go insane or die. The newer settings aren't as cruel, but it's still pretty fun. But as far as like the Star Trek Adventures, I've just fallen in love with it. I'll admit, the Fallout system, or the Fallout game from Modiphius, is one of my favorite universes to play in. But it uses the same, very similar 2d20 base system, just dealing with special attributes instead of the two different types of attributes we deal with Star Trek Adventures. But it's definitely, they all have their key points, and there are some times when I wish that 2d20 had a fantasy version or even a Doctor Who version, because it'd be fun to. I could definitely see how the roles would work for it. What? How long have you all been playing role-playing games in general?
The question. When did I think it's probably when I was 20 years old. So that's probably around 18 years ago. Oh, that's sad. Yeah.
20, 25 years.
Yeah.
On and off.
I'm about the same number as Felix.
Yeah, I'm definitely the newcomer in this particular case, I started maybe about 6 years ago. I actually,
Are you serious? Because you're a very, very capable GM, and that's impressive. I would have I suspected you to be someone who had played and GM'd for much longer.
well, I suppose so. I have the most complementary skill. I've had the most complementary skills for longer. That is to say, a long time just pondering headcanon and encyclopedic bits of knowledge on particular fandoms, most especially Star Trek. But I've also been spoiled by very excellent GMs here. My very first one, actually, and very dear friend, introduced me with Dragon Age. She pulled me and my then girlfriend, now wife, into a campaign together, and we greatly enjoyed that. We wound up gaming together for as long as the group could cohere, but scheduling difficulties made that untenable eventually. And it was by that time that I decided to. That was part of the inspiration to strike out on my own. I would like to shout them out, of course, and I will attempt to remember to put a link in the description of the archived video for them as well, but I can at least drop something here. Just a quick shout out to my friend Crane, or Clockwork Crane. Let's see. They they don't do much tabletop content, or they haven't done anything tabletop content wise on their channel, but they do a lot of good variety streaming. They came on fairly recently, and I think they actually just made it to affiliate here on Twitch. So for those that are watching this live, I'll drop the link. I'd say give them a follow, check them out sometime. It's She's a dear friend, and I actually owe her all the renditions of my like the artwork for my personal avatar, including the one I am using here now. So yeah, if you ever check this out, Crane, you are the best, and I have been and always shall be your friend.
Bonus points for the tuck in of quote there. That's awesome.
Yep.
So I know pre-COVID, a lot of us met in person. The whole idea of streaming games and connecting with it kind of seemed more. It was out there, and it was kind of growing in popularity thanks to things like Critical Role and stuff like that. How has the change from meeting in person, having in person games, affected you? Like doing the remote stuff, have you enjoyed it? Do you still prefer the in person aspect? And what have been some of the challenges you've faced with doing remote versus face to face?
I'm sorry, I can't force a laugh. I haven't done in-person gaming probably in 5 years at this point, so I am the exact wrong person to ask about this.
Oh, well, I found that, I was already in with a Roll20 group that was just from all over the place prior to COVID-19. So I was somewhat prepared for it. But I used to really enjoy in person. But, COVID kind of killed some groups that I was playing with, and then, groups reform and stuff like that. So even given all the challenges of online, I was really happy to meet up with this group because they get together, they're very regular, so.
Yeah, I've only really ever done online gaming. I do tend to meet up with some online friends about once a year in Canada, and do a lot of gaming in person then, which is a lot of fun. Unfortunately, had to cancel that basically 2 years running because of good old Corona. But got to do it again this year, so that's great.
Well, my major drawback is that I live in Germany and the RPG scene is not yet entered the digital age, not really. So finding a in-person group is an absolute nightmare. So I'm very happy that online is an option.
Felix, have you ever played Dark Eye, which is supposedly a German version of like D&D?
No, I never have.
Okay.
I
But
never
that's
have.
it's very popular there, right?
Yeah, it is. And there definitely is an RPG scene here, but again, it's really hard to find them. And I also kind of, since I've spent a couple years in Scotland, I kind of prefer to play my games in English because I read the rules and everything in English, and it makes it like doubly hard.
Well, we're glad to have you. You're an excellent player. So
Thank you. I'll take that.
You're a great player. We like you, and we trust you completely.
Yeah, definitely not a Romulan.
Definitely not.
Hashtag not a Romulan.
Yes.
I think that's been one of the biggest
And-
things that I've seen from coming out of the whole remote stuff is like you have these gaming groups that start off when they're usually in college or high school, and they all go their separate ways, but they're able to keep connected somehow and still keep their games and stuff going. And even just interacting with people from around the world that you wouldn't normally even run into is absolutely fantastic. And I've ran a couple of ran in a couple of games that had people from other countries, and the way they role play and stuff is different than what we do here in the States sometimes. And it can be a real big eye opener for, just that cultural difference. And it's fascinating to see, and it's really fun to interact with.
yeah, it really is. I like gaming with people from different parts of the world. I'm in a cyberpunk game, and one of the players is from Southeast Asia, and he's just off the chart, really good young player. Yeah, so it's really fun to play with people, and I like playing with Europeans too. So I've just had some great gaming experiences. Oh, another odd game I've played and run is 40K. I've run Dark Heresy and stuff like that before.
Oh, odd games. There's two games come to mind. One, Fate. I don't know if anyone has played the Fate system
Oh
yet.
yeah, Fate is interesting.
Which is fantastic. Has some elements that Star Trek Adventures also has, like the what's it called? Your values. And the other one is actually another German role-playing game, which is called Funky Coals. And it's
What?
basically entirely 80s action TV. So you play like only cliches and tropes. Like you play basically whatever you want, but it's like the A-Team or the cop shows of the 80s and 90s. And there's like literal rules that guns are useless. Because in the A-Team, no one gets ever hit.
Yeah, no one.
So,
a lot of guns may go off.
yeah, and we had a brilliant campaign, and we just were playing in tropes. Like my character was just called TJ, and his name was never revealed, and we decided his name would only be revealed in a Christmas special. It's just all these stupid things that you can just wedge in, because this doesn't make sense, but everyone who's watched these series in the 80s, 90s is just like, yeah, this feels familiar.
So cool, Felix.
That's great.
That is so cool.
Just runs off rule of cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, please.
No, it was, what was it?
I was about to say the other system I played and run, which I quite like, is One Ring RPG, Tolkien. And I ran a Shire game in that for at the very beginning of COVID-19 for a bunch of friends who got orphaned from their games. So it was set just before the War of the Rings, as like stuff is starting to happen around the Shire. It was really fun.
What's a Shire game? Roll for Second Breakfast?
Well, okay, so Tolkien mentioned in his notes about what was happening in the Shire while Frodo's off doing the ring thing, and what's happening just prior to him leaving in bursts of about 10 years. So the Shire had a force called the Bounders, because, creatures were starting to appear, and natural ones, and, appear on the edges of the Shire. So they were all they were the Shire's sheriff's, special forces team. They went out to deal with the weird stuff. And, spiders and wolves and things appearing on the edge of the Shire. So, the rule system worked really well, and the players had a lot of fun with it. So they made these funny characters, but some of the fights in there were just the fights. It's like Star Trek Adventures. You don't want to pick that fight unless you absolutely have to.
Otherwise, it sounds like the A-Team Hobbit edition.
It was kind of that. The Bounders were something that Tolkien mentioned, that there were these hobbits. Unfortunately, during the aftermath of that campaign in The Lord of the Rings, the Shire gets overrun. But, it made for an interesting thing. So it was fun.
I have yet to run in a Cyberpunk game. I really want to. I've made characters for Cyberpunk 27, or no. What was it? The Shadowrun. I've made characters for that, but the game ended up falling apart before we got a chance to play.
Let me give you a bit of strange advice for Shadowrun. The system, the world, absolutely fantastic. The lore, brilliant. The flavor, immaculate. The system, a dumpster fire.
Yeah, exactly. It's so hard to run for it.
It has gotten better in recent editions, but you basically need several rule books to play one character, kinda, and then you need to understand all of the rule books. It's an absolute nightmare.
That's kind of like the Palladium books. It just feels like you never have the right book when you need it.
Yeah, exactly.
For all the different character options. Star Wars is like that too. Sometimes the Fantasy Flight Star Wars game, at least it felt like that for me. When we played that, another system that I really want to try, and it uses the Fate system, is the Unwritten. If anybody has played the computer game Myst, Riven,
Yeah.
those things, there's a ttrpg called Unwritten that's based in that universe. There's hardly any combat, but it's all puzzle based, and it's based off the Fate system. I have yet to be able to run it or play it, but I've got the books, and it's really an interesting read. Unfortunately, most of the players that I know, they don't like non-hack and slash or non-combat stuff, so it doesn't fit them, but it's definitely one to check out. And then shameless plug, I've been writing for a seafaring campaign setting called Elfwood for several years now, and it uses a D6 system.
D6 Fantasy?
It uses its own. It's called 6S.
Is that like one of the mini 6 variants, or?
Well, it's kind of their own system. 6S was it. It uses kind of the exploding dice. It's very similar to other systems. But unfortunately, we've got our website down right now just because we're updating it for stuff coming up. But it's a fairly decent system, and it'll be out sometime. Elfwood will at least be out sometime next year, hopefully. But as far as any other weird systems, I don't know. Off the Big Eyes Small Mouth was just ridiculously funny because all of us that were playing it were big anime fans, so we didn't take it serious at all, and I don't think you can. But okay, back to questions. Let's go through your characters and talk a little bit about how you came up with the character, some of the high points that you've had with your characters. Why don't we start with Craig?
Yeah, okay. So, Yula Sheara's been a character which has been bouncing around in my head for some time and occasionally escapes to have some fun. The first iteration really of hers going back to Shield of Tomorrow and the Discord they had set up, and there was a role-playing section for that for lower decks crew members, and I played an Andorian security officer called Yula Sheara, who is very similar to Yula. In fact, one might say just literally a different time and a slightly different name. And I suppose different organisation she works for, but
A
yeah.
mild Nick Locarno situation. Or Nick Locarno to Tom Paris.
Yeah. So yeah, I role played her there for a while. Then used her as a secondary character in the Star Trek game Zach was running before this. So when he said he was doing this Enterprise era game, I always did love Shran in Enterprise. Jeffrey Combs is brilliant as Shran, and I think every episode with Shran in it is a cut above most other Enterprise episodes. What they did with Andorians was fantastic. So it just seemed natural just to find a way just to crowbar her into this. So yeah, came up with a reason why she should be seconded to Starfleet, being I guess a bit like T'Pol's role in Enterprise. And yeah, so there she is, pretending to be an ancestor of Yula Sheara.
All right. How about our chief engineer, Brian? Not Chief Engineer O'Brien, but Brian, the chief engineer.
That's right. Well, in terms of the character concept, once he mentioned they needed an engineer, I was pretty excited by that because other groups I play with, there's just some players who will always play that character concept. So I never had a chance to play a chief engineer. But so that was the first thing. And then I had to kind of figure out where this person's background came from. So I went with the idea that she came from a family that worked on ships, in the orbital docks and, or that come into orbit of Alpha Centauri, boomer ships and stuff like that. So, and then I had, after a couple conversations with the GM, we had this idea about the character having attended a Vulcan private school. So that's how the whole Vulcan martial arts came into the storyline as well. So once that was fused onto the character, I was pretty happy. And that's sort of the background I came up with.
And Felix, what about you?
Well, I always liked Vulcans on a general principle, but I always thought they didn't make any sense at all. Because their pure emotionless logic is like, to make any plot possible, it's always subverted. And I wanted to play a Vulcan that is just not like abandoned all reason, so to speak. And went more like with we can keep aggression under control. It's like every species does that. And then I slapped on top of that the mad scientist that is in my heart. So
all right. Let's ask our wonderful game master. What I know you've mentioned that you haven't played very often. You've been kind of the forever GM, but it takes a little bit of character creation mindset to develop some of the characters you run with. What's kind of your process for coming up with either an NPC or even a character you would like to play? If you have some on top of your head there.
Well, most of the characters are pretty much purpose-built, or pretty much everyone is going to start from that. Um, Oftentimes, there will be a lot of one-off figures for plot, or someone that might recur later that has some significance. There are a handful of everyday characters that just re-emerge and or that have a special place and even take on a certain mimetic quality. I suppose I'd be remiss not to bring up this fellow here, who in a previous life or a future life, as you may put it, was a Benzite, is a Benzite, will be a Benzite, in a very similar operationsy role. And with Crichton in particular, the this is actually a most direct reference back to that. It's the character that I used before I carried that over into characters, I should say, among other sci-fi interests, I am a Red Dwarf fan. I have not kept up with anything since Series 9, however, so I say what you will about my Red Dwarf fandom card. But I'd done a little bit of work with it as somebody in competitive public speaking, debate, and performance work. I'd actually gone so far as to devise a sort of a program around that actually used some of that. So as a result, I had to I actually worked in Crichton as a character for that, or used excerpts of some performances. I think it was from the Wax Droid episode. It was years ago at this point. But essentially, I liked reusing that voice for characters every so often. So I think first I reused that for a Denobulan, for a Denobulan ops officer for a game that I played maybe once, and then recycled it for Demok, the operations officer, who, in a sense, made a little guest appearance a bit earlier in the campaign, or rather in the one shot. And his now I guess apparently his cousin, what was it, Mindak? I don't remember now. But yes, when I decided to just recycle that character voice for Crichton, and it's little things I like to do for that. I guess straying away from it, it's a bit of an aside on the question there, but yeah, generally there are some characters I will think of way in advance and how significant they are to interact with things. There are some where the players are bringing something to the table, and I want to try and work with them to flesh out the character, bring them to life as much as possible, and just, make it to where those interactions will really be felt. And yeah, I suppose I'll just generally I'll try to think about the questions insofar as the life path system is concerned. Which, for those unfamiliar, Modiphius has a life path system to design to help design player characters, and I do like to ask some of those questions when I'm formulating them to try and best suss out motivations or help me consider how they got to this stage. Obviously, when there are things that I deliberately want done with them, I would, place my thumb on the scale there and ask, well, how does this deliberate event mesh with everything else that I've already kind of cohered around? And so that creates some interesting dynamics, or some things that I wouldn't have always necessarily expected.
Well, very cool. It's cool to see that perspective. I love character creation from other people's perspectives, because you never know where they're coming from, if they're going to, when I started out character creation, it was, I'm just going to copy Legolas for my D&D game and call it good. And over the years, it's evolved from that by just listening to other people's character creation. So it's fun to see. We're at about the hour mark. So we'll have a few more questions on the game itself, and then we'll talk a little bit more about Star Trek itself. If you could take part in any era of Star Trek adventures, what era would you want to either play or run in? And this goes out to everybody.
I was quite be interested in the Dominion War. I think that's got quite an interesting area to look at, whether you're dealing on more of the fighting side of things, or perhaps looking at what diplomacy actions the Federation is doing during this time. I think it's quite an interesting area to be in, especially since the GM could just randomly throw a Dominion attack ship at you.
That's another one of those questions that there isn't really a wrong or a right answer. It really depends on the series, to be honest. Like how that depicts Star Trek and the universe and everything. But from a general perspective, probably as far into the future as possible. Simply because they finally get a hang on the techno babble in a way. It's like the original series is great, but they're like barely doing science.
That and the what might be then progressive would feel really weird and out of place too. Like just in terms of where society is.
Yeah, and I mean it was like science fiction for the time it was created, but we've already surpassed that in several aspects, so it's kind of weirdish. I liked, for example, and this is very controversial, and I will keep it brief, but I liked like some of the aspects of technology in the first episodes of Discovery, where they had like a hull breach and then the security fields breached that off, and stuff like that, which would never have seen in the original series, because that is technology they should have at this point. And I love about Strange New Worlds that they made the technology still kind of the same basic technology from the TOS, but they made it look science fiction-y from today's standpoint.
That was my biggest struggle with Discovery. If they had set Discovery in the future, past Deep Space Nine, past Voyager, that technology difference, I don't think it would have been as annoying as it was for me. But yeah, it just felt too like this is off. But yeah, I liked what they did with Strange New Worlds with the ship and the technology and stuff like that. And the engine room felt like an engine room, not this clean cut. How do I describe the next gen engine room? But it felt a lot more like industrial.
It's very clean. It doesn't feel like a different part from any other part of the ship.
Brian, what about you? What's your what would be your era? Dream era?
My favorite would be, I think, and that's what I'm thinking of running my next game in, is post-Dominion War, like right after the Dominion War. I think would be interesting with, or at the end of the Dominion War, but then the campaign shifts, so that's what interests me. And I also like Lost Era because there's just so little canon. You can really make your players the key people, So I run a game that's basically, 8 years after, Generations, where Kirk died. And it's nice because I get to do a Sulu imitation. And most of the technology is starting to appear the canon says in Lost Era holodecks are appearing. So I made an NX holodeck, an aspect of the game, and the players have enjoyed that. So.
And I think my answer still depends very much on like some bits of the situation. A part of me wouldn't mind the idea of being around in that on a ship in that era after the Romulan War during the rise of the Federation and taking those first sort of steps towards what the universe would eventually become, being one of the people to blaze that trail, as it were.
Yeah, well, there's a 20-year gap or more. It's something like 20 years. There's very little canon, and
it's 100 years. It's about 100 years in terms of what you see on screen.
Well,
from
I
the end of
think
Enterprise.
Yeah, it is almost 100 years. I think that you've pegged in a really interesting point, and that's one that I've thought about game ideas for, which is doing that sort of, dawn of the Federation type thing. And I think it's really interesting because you could still potentially have like Archer around as president, because I think canon mentions he ends up as president or hints at it, one of the first Federation presidents. So I think it's a really interesting period to run into. That's one that interests me as well. That's one reason I jumped into your game. I thought, well, I'm going to be in this game set in the Enterprise era, and it's really going to familiarize me with the era and the tech and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
so.
And like, I think that this is a very interesting era to explore in that sense. There's a very good book series that sadly I don't know if they'll be doing anything more with it, but it was the Rise of the Federation series by Christopher L. Bennett, sorry. Totally recommend that. They have, I think, 5 books in the series, basically covering the early years of the Federation and where the Enterprise crew is doing things. There's also a very good series preceding that, which I don't think bears too much mention right now. Not too much in what might be ahead. But anyway, what's that? Otherwise, I suppose with the foreknowledge that I have otherwise, it'd probably be nice to be able to be in Starfleet during a later era and push the boundaries of what's out there, be able to understand more. Maybe
what's really good, I've been reading the Shackleton Expanse supplement, and I'm weaving that into my current campaigns, and it's very well done. They've created a good setting idea there.
Yeah, it'd be nice to maybe to just be able to stop either see how far things go up to just before the burn, when the big sad means that nobody can have space travel anymore, and yeah, just let that bit of memory get burned out, and be at a ship at warp during that time. That'd be good.
Yeah, the burn campaign ideas. A burn campaign idea is interesting for sure.
Oh no, I'm not saying be like have a campaign set during the burn or after the burn, or the idea of
horrible.
I would enter that campaign saying, you have a better change the origin story or so. Help me God.
Yeah, maybe I'll be on the extragalactic survey mission that leaves during that time. Just pull the be on the equivalent of the Mass Effect Andromeda type mission. Maybe go to Andromeda and explore strange new worlds and not lose your dilithium travel.
Oh, I have a curveball for you all. Interesting time to play in Star Trek. Just after First Contact.
Oh, that would be
Cochrane has just developed the first warp engine. The Vulcans have made first contact. What happens?
A pretty that seems like you need a much more grimdark engine, or be prepared to go very grimdark, given that you still have the whole post-atomic horror to get through.
That'd be pretty interesting, though.
Yeah, definitely.
Let's not pretend there's no dystopian horrors in any of the Star Trek season.
Oh no, I can't say that. Not with this campaign, or any of them really.
I think it's funny when we got the call, or when I noticed the post for the Broken Sword game, it was going to be set in the Klingon universe. I'm like, oh, I'm all for that. I'm diehard Klingon. We're gonna do this Kaploth kind of stuff, and like my ideal setting to eventually play in or run is kind of like more Firefly set in the Star Trek universe, kind of around the DS9 era. So you're basically freelancers running around, doing stuff. You're still being affected by the Federation and their rules, but you're not tied to them. So the prime directive isn't as important to you as Latinum or money. But it's funny going into the Broken Sword game. We've kind of become that just through gameplay and through story and stuff like that, where we're not direct. I mean, we still interact a lot with the Klingon Empire, and there's a few characters that are very much, for the Empire, for the greater good of the Empire. But for the most part, we're just kind of just doing our own thing, doing jobs and getting paid.
There's something that might interest you. There's an old supplement from FASA. I think it's called Traders and Merchants. And it kind of goes into that whole world. But you're right, a game like that would be very interesting. They kind of give hints of that with Picard, in that you've got, one of the characters who has a free trade. He operates his own starship. So it's out there. And it's just I've never seen anybody run one.
Well, the Empire just isn't much of a. I mean, don't get me wrong. The Klingons they can still pretty thoroughly wreck everyone's shit at this point, but they are not like this isn't the Empire at this point, or when we see it at the start of Discovery, which this will partly lead into for those interested in the Broken Sword campaign. But that Empire is not the Empire truly that we see by the time of TOS. There are some pretty transformative experiences that take place for them. I would actually, on that note, I do want to shout out one other sort of interesting project I found. There's this. They're mostly on Twitter right now. They might be branching out to other spaces though. Something called The Edge of Midnight. It is a sort of fan work history novel, basically detailing the Federation Klingon Cold War. I'll drop a link to the. For those in the chat here, I'll drop something on Twitch. I will also be sure to put something down in the archive. So for those of you watching,
I plan on actually doing that. So I have 3 games, 2 very short ones and 1 longer one. The 2 very short ones are pre-Wrath of Khan, and they're connected to my Lost Era campaign, which is set there. And I've started looking at that. At your recommendation, I started looking at that, and I may use some of the material. It's interesting.
Yeah. But
have any of you participated in the Living campaign stuff they've got from Modiphius for Star Trek Adventures?
No.
No.
I cannot say I have, no.
I have the materials downloaded and I've read through some of them, but I haven't actually played them either. It's fascinating. For those listening, Modiphius does have, for Star Trek Adventures, they call it a living campaign, which basically is kind of like akin to like Pathfinder societies and the D&D Adventures Guild, where theoretically the stuff that you do and you report back affects the next story. So you're more of a global campaign kind of thing versus the individual stories like what we experienced with Stabs and with Aegis. So it's definitely stuff to check out. All right, let's dive into Trek a little bit. We'll start off with what's your favorite episode, or some of your favorite episodes from any of the eras, any of the series. I'll just say it. Mine is House of Quark. That's got to be my favorite one from Deep Space Nine. Quark sitting there trying to convince the Klingon High Council or talk to them about financial transactions.
All the Klingons standing around looking and increasingly confused.
No, that was a really good episode. My favorite DS9 is sort of an obscure one. Well, I got two. The one where they hit a barrier and suddenly their descendants, it's 300 years later. I'm totally going to pirate that idea for an episode to just freak out my players. And then the other one was the one where the Jem'Hadar, Julian, Bashir, and O'Brien had ended up on a planet with a bunch of Jem'Hadar, well, one Jem'Hadar who had beat the white addiction. And it was so interesting because you got to see this guy's psychology change about how he viewed the Dominion. I don't know, it's just, I liked that one.
Well, you're all wrong.
I think my favorite
go ahead, Craig.
is In the Pale Moonlight. It has got some brilliant acting by Andrew Robinson and Avery Brooks, and well, any episode with Garak is instantly a classic, and this one, yeah, the way he Garak explains it all to Sisko in the end, how he basically killed the Romulan
And
senator.
all it cost was the dignity of one Starfleet officer.
Yes.
That's what I call a bargain.
Beautiful.
Yeah,
that was
Sisko's trying to convince himself at the end that he can live with it. So good.
That's the ultimate inspiration for your entire log and then computer delete log. Well, it's a fantastic episode, but you're still wrong, because the only best episode in all of Star Trek is Darmok. The Tamarians are just generations ahead of any other alien race they ever introduced. And it's a shame they not get used more.
I loved the character building they did with Picard during that episode, because you got to see him, kind of tear away the proper command, I guess, Starfleet elements to him and get down to a little bit more of the core of who he was. And we get to see that a lot during Generations, when his nephew passes away, or when the one episode where he goes back to visit the winery for a vacation. I can't think of the episode.
Family.
Yeah. When he's talking there, you can see some of it, but during Darmok, you got to see it kind of in action, and that was really good.
Yeah, for me, it's just like the idea that, because like a lot of technologies in Star Trek are kind of hand wavy, and that's fine because you have to make a plot somehow, and you can't explain everything. But it's like to have a species whose language is just so fundamentally different from yours that even if you translate all the words, you will not gain any insight into their meaning. It's just brilliant. And my biggest complaint about the episode is that they have like a language to decipher, and they put like the ship's counselor and the chief engineer. Who was it? I can't remember, but like the two least qualified people on the task.
I think Data was actually working with Troy that time.
Yeah, but even Data is like, this is clearly not a problem that can be solved by a computer. And I know we're coming out to Measures of a Man, which also is an excellent episode, but still, he's still trying to be human.
Yeah. I think that at this time, if I had to give any particular episode a nod right now, because there are many to pick from the shows, I would say that I very much enjoy. Um, I was going to give a mention to United, which is another season 4 Enterprise episode, but I think that I still actually have to center in on the Demons Terra Prime two-parter that comes at the end. What would be the truest season finale for Enterprise in its last season? Because I think that like it is it's been part of what that season in particular was building through the mini arcs, really working to establish the birth of the Federation. It gives you a really neat picture on how developments from the home front, which we so rarely saw with Enterprise, how those were starting to come to a head in a way right as all of Archer's other work is trying to culminate into a bigger project. Archer and the crew, I suppose, more broadly, and it's a really tight sort of thriller. I feel like the messaging behind that, I honestly felt like that was that sort of that appeal to sort of broader ideas of cooperation, of not fearing the other, and being able to take those first steps together to work together against the evils of like fear, nativism, all that sort of thing. Um, I feel like that is a message that if it had aired a decade later, would have been especially salient um, from its original time. But that's neither here nor there, I guess. So that one sticks with me, I think, right now.
Well, one of the things was that Enterprise was really, as a series, screwed by Paramount. The executives who were in charge at that time, they did not think that Star Trek was worth investing in. So, and because it took a season or two to gain traction, it was easy for Paramount to convince the board of directors to cancel the show.
I think that series would have been much better served if they made more use of their other parts of the supporting cast, in particular for UPN demographics. Give us more Hoshi and definitely more Travis.
Yeah.
Most underutilized characters, and criminally so. But that's neither here nor there. That network doesn't even exist anymore. They paid for their decisions, I suppose. Anyway, neither here nor there.
Who out of Star Trek is your favorite Star Trek character?
There are so many.
Yeah, that's my problem.
My immediate Jape response is the outrageous O'Connor, but no, of course not. That is no.
Garak has to be.
Doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I feel like Garrick is definitely a strong contender. Can I just say Jeffrey Coombs?
Jeffrey Coombs. I was
That
thinking
works.
Wei Yun and Shran. So yeah, that covers that.
I mean, I have to say all the captains in all the seasons are really great characters aside from Burnham. So any one of them could be like a good favorite, but Garak is just Garak.
if I had to think of like a mainline sort of a mainline character from the series, like somebody that is to say, among the actual Starfleet crew that, or any of the Starfleet crews that, um, I really like Riker quite a bit. Um, I think that I think he had some interesting arcs. They unfortunately, like, honestly, the more I've thought about it, and in particular, I was thinking about this after I'd thought about that one Parallels episode, the one where Worf accidentally hits an interdimensional kerfuffle type thing and keeps jumping between his different reality counterparts. And like part of the reason they do it is obviously to justify or to help tease further the Worf Troy romance they were trying to make work in season 7, which eh. But the the big thing with that is honestly, it makes me think of the show that we could have had, um, where if Patrick Stewart had left after season 3, after the Best of Both Worlds, um, I do kind of, I honestly am kind of curious what the Next Generation would have looked like with Captain Riker for those seasons and how it would have affected things from there. I actually think in some ways it would have been a more interesting show because while Riker doesn't have I mean, Jonathan Frakes and Patrick Stewart bring very different things to the show, but I think that it would have allowed for sort of continued growth for Riker's arc there. You know, I think that there might have been more interesting. I think that they might have actually leaned back into, eventually leaned back into the Troy Riker romance in earlier than they do in the films, and that they maybe I'm giving the '90s writers too much credit, but maybe they'd have actually done something interesting with it. I also think that while he might have handled it differently in some cases, he might have arrived at a, a few of Picard's like realizations the same way, or he might have gone through some things differently. Just it'd be interesting to see how that basically watch how that butterfly effect unfolds.
I lost track of that conversation. That was really good. Did everybody get a chance to say who their favorite was?
I've got so many. I can't think of one that jumps out. I've had a lot of characters that I've liked. I did like and this is Discovery. Sort of, I liked the non-com gal that was always like talking back and stuff, and always had a snarky remark. I thought she was kind of interesting.
Reno?
Yeah, Reno. Exactly. I liked Reno.
Played by the incomparable Tig Notaro.
I really liked, what was his name? The one from the Mirror Universe.
Lorca.
Lorca, yeah, I really, really liked him. And with every interesting character in Discovery, they just killed him off.
Would anyone mind if I go on my slight Discovery rant here, or like
Go for it.
Depends. We only have. I need it under the tree at Christmas. So if you can't keep it short.
So here's the thing, and this is kind of, I think I'm starting to get what Brian Fuller might have originally planned for it. That series obviously had some turnover with the showrunners. I could see like up through the Ship of the Dead, the narrative threads mostly of what Fuller might have been going for, because he's mentioned in some interviews since then that he did have the idea for a mirror universe, but he had more of a sense of the idea that it was more about a difference in choice as opposed to gold lame sashes and all of that. I actually think that so as one who is not a fan at all about the Mirror Universe arc, even though it was the way to salvage the fact that they murdered Michelle Yeoh in the first episode. or in that pilot segment.
Which is an insane decision.
Yes, it is very dumb. Here's kind of what I think. So part of what is off-putting to me about Discovery is how it, at least in that first season, is how it kind of deviates from the traditional formula. If you think of the Enterprise, there are a number of staple episodes where the Enterprise arrives at a crisis scene. There's something terrible that has happened, and there is sometimes a crew, or maybe survivors of a crew, that are still there, and like the one character of focus we get from that is like exposits to the crew and is just kind of shaken by the experience. You think there are good and bad episodes that do this. On the bad end, you have the Omega Glory, where the one Klingon, or rather the one Federation captain, gets involved with the Cold War as it played out on a different planet. Our literal Cold War. The Kirk reads the Pledge of Allegiance. Warship words. On the good end of that spectrum, you'd have something like the Doomsday Machine, where you have Decker as like a very obviously traumatized person after he tried to save his crew and distract the thing, but wound up losing them and having a wrecked ship and everything. But yeah, the crew of the Enterprise, they get through they get to the situation. Maybe one of the characters has a tie with this that creates friction, or they're just working through with the disaster character the problem, but they work the problem, they encounter the same issue, and they figure out a solution, and somehow manage to come away from it. Sometimes the disaster character survives, sometimes they don't, but the protagonists come through, and there's problem solving, cooperation in space, all that sort of thing, and they come out at least okay. Discovery was different because Burnham was our protagonist, and she was also the disaster character. Instead of and it really hinged on that moment in the ready room in that first episode where she tries to convince Giorgio to strike first, and I really think that that alternate choice, that other reality, would be where Burnham decides not to nerve pinch Giorgio, and actually, if she'd gone through and worked the problem a little bit more, I think that Burnham, as the xenoanthropologist, might have read T'Kuvma's moves and realized, wait a minute, he's deliberately trying to start a set-piece battle to ignite a war. I need to get into a shuttle, Captain, and I need to tell our ships to stop so that T'Kuvma doesn't have an excuse. So that, I think that in the original, I could see a different version of Discovery playing out where the ship jumps to a different universe, but it's not the mirror universe, it's just an alternate one where Burnham basically kept her shit together and wound up becoming captain of the Discovery in that timeline, and there was no war with the Klingons. So she realizes, wow, rash decisions that are too brutal are not a good Starfleet thing to do. And you have the added benefit of not making Lorca, mirror universe monster person that way. It could have wound up where instead of Mirror Empress Giorgio wanting to commit genocide and Starfleet being okay with that, Lorca kind of has his own plans to do so, and Burnham mutinies again, but this time to act in favor of peace as opposed to destruction. And maybe you can have a similar end to play out, but I just feel like that would have been a little more tightly wound, I guess. I'm sorry.
Burnham is just a terrifyingly badly written character. I cannot stress enough how much this is not the actress, but it's literally the character has no
absolutely.
direction.
And it
drags the entire show down. Saru is a fantastic choice for a captain, and maybe Burnham, not in the forced leader role, would be a decent character. But no, she's forced to be the leader, and she's terrible at it.
It kind of harkens back to a TOS type thing. Discovery in these later seasons is basically power trio of Burnham, Saru, and third person. Sometimes it's McCoy. Sometimes you get Scotty.
Are they even doing any more Discovery? Or
There is at least one more season in the works right now.
I have no idea how that gets renewed. Honestly.
Well, they've settled into a different groove now, so they got something that works here. But yeah, that is my Discovery rant there.
My only Discovery rant is after rewatching it with the mindset that this isn't a Star Trek series, it's a sci-fi series, because I hate what they did with the Klingons. It makes a decent sci-fi series. If they would have taken all the Star Trek stuff out of it, all the Star Trek references and stuff like that out of it, it would have been the first couple seasons would have been perfect as a sci-fi series. But yeah, and of course we mentioned the technology issues that I had with where they set it, especially with the way the ship warped into that special. We're going to turn the bridge or the saucer section really fast to go into that special warp, and it's like, that's just weird. Let's see. What's your favorite plot twist of Star Trek?
Quark.
This is kind of a tricky one because usually they were pretty straightforward with their plots, but what's been one of your favorite plot twists?
Bashir was a changeling.
That is
when you see in the
Excuse me, what?
Dominion prison, when you see in the Dominion prison Bashir being brought through the door, and then they cut to changeling Bashir offering Jadzia and O'Brien a nice sandwich. It's like, oh, he's been a changeling for a while.
I do like that. I was always particularly keen on the Vlas administration having ties to the Romulans twist there. At the end of the Kirshar. At the end of the Kirshar arc.
Never trust a Vulcan.
That's a really difficult question.
Yeah, because
I guess what my choice would be, and I'm getting from a very limited supply of episodes I actually remember the good twist of, is one of the most random Star Trek series to ever exist, Voyager, where you see like the entire time the crew and ship struggling and in the end getting destroyed, and then it turns out they were just they landed on a planet and were copied by like intelligent metal something, and that flew off. And it was all just they have no idea what happened, and then fly through the debris that's no longer identifiable, and that's just such a cool science fiction concept. It's not even Star Trek twist or anything, but it's just like that was just cool. It's at no point in the series, but it's just yeah, it's also sad. But
Course Oblivion is some of the best grimdark Star Trek I think that's been put out there.
And also shows what happens when Harry Kim gets to be in charge of a starship.
Yep.
Voyager, the Year of Hell. Hang on, Mo. Voyager itself, when we had the episode of the Year of Hell, that's how Voyager should have looked when she came home. The thing that threw me off was the fact that every couple of episodes we'd have, almost an immaculate ship, and they never really addressed the limited supplies to try to rebuild the ship. They mentioned the gel packs at one point, but for the most part, it's pretty much just this immaculate ship when it comes back home, and we just don't see the wear and tear on the crew or on the ship like we should have.
That's what Joe Carey was doing for the 3 years he didn't appear on screen. Rebuilding ship components, rebuilding shuttles, and building more torpedoes.
I still don't know why they have such a problem with supplies, because they do have replicators, and I cannot imagine that it's so difficult to charge them with suitable energy in the fucking master technology they have.
In the canon, they've mentioned that there are just certain things that are hard to replicate. And so they use that in a number of episodes to justify a shortage. But so I guess there's just certain things you can't replicate easily, you know.
Yeah,
and
but that's like
that's what they'll go for as the explanation.
yeah, but that's what Joe mentioned, that you have seen no wear and tear on the Voyager. If you just watch a random episode of Voyager, which is my entire experience with Voyager, because in German TV it was just like random episodes. At least that's what I felt like. I don't know if there was actually an order to them, and I just missed all of them.
They did have a episode reset button quite often.
Yeah, and it's just you cannot tell how far into the journey this is, because it always looks the same.
Yep, very true. The only real distinguishing mark is whether you see Kess in an episode or 7.
Yes.
True.
I
And,
suppose you could possibly try to track it by Janeway's hairstyle. They did change that quite frequently.
Yes, they eventually let her out of the iron bun.
Well, we are at the 2-hour mark, Mr. GM and other folks here. Did you want to keep going, or would you want this to be a good stopping point?
Well, at this point, so we don't really have much in the way of questions from the outside, so there isn't much for me to field there on that end. I suppose I generally give the players an opportunity to ask me questions about particular adventures, but I guess, are there particular elements of the campaign so far that you just feel as noteworthy, or that things you'd like to explore a little more, or even other questions from me on that you would feel comfortable bringing up here, of course.
I still have questions to the previous campaign.
And you can ask them in their own due time.
Yeah, I do have a question. It'll be interesting to go into that whole artifact thing, the artifact that Romanov was exposed to that led her to be knocked unconscious, and Section 31 from Starfleet.
Section 8.
Oh yeah, Soral is looking very much forward to studying this artifact.
It wasn't Section 31, it was Section 8.
No.
Romanov that sounds like a slip of the tongue, doesn't it?
Romanov is not Section 31. There are no Romulans in the crew.
Could you stop putting this into their heads, goddammit?
Don't worry about
Come
it.
on, we'll start thinking that there's not any Romulans on the crew. We know that there's probably at least.
There's just a Section 31 agent in engineering now.
All I'm going to say is, if there is a Romulan on the crew, I'm not aware of it. That's my entire defense. What Zach has planned, I don't know.
Memory altered, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
Look,
Soral's
Zach has
memory has been altered.
Zach has the entire freedom of choice. If he wants to go with that, I'm down. I'm like literally 2 feet on the ground and say, let's go with this. But I, Felix, have no idea if that is the case. I'm a Vulcan. A weird Vulcan, a questionable Vulcan, sure, but I'm Vulcan. That's my standpoint.
One of the people who always supports Soral is Romanov. She's been very, she's been very supportive of him.
Yeah, which starts to worrying me now that I know your terrorist master.
Now that you know my terrorist master, exactly.
He is definitely like some terrorist freedom fighter, something. He is so sketchy.
Okay, Felix?
Well, he's the Vulcan Kwai Chang King. That's what I totally pitched at the GM in the Great Barrier when we created the character concept.
And I know what I pitched to the Great GM in the Barrier for my previous character, and Greg knows how that turned out.
Felix, just don't think about the Borg.
I never think about the Borg.
Yes. Good, don't.
We just had Hakif in a hyper dreadnought Derridax with star destroying missiles. It's fine. Don't worry about anything. It's
Yeah,
fine.
Don't worry about the Borg.
It's all fine. It's all
Yeah.
fine.
Okay. So,
Getting stressed.
I do have one question for GM.
Yeah.
Andorians, when?
That's a very good
We already
question.
have Andorians.
Oh, rest
I said
assured.
Andorians plural. We only have one on board.
I'm
Yeah.
sorry. We have reached the Andorian quota that we can afford for the makeup department.
More Andorians.
We've been saving up in the budget, and yeah, stay tuned. Particularly in this next arc that we are about to enter when we come back from the break. I will say we are about to coincide with some major events.
Oh God.
Ooh, yeah. Wait.
I mean, I think there was one question from that you like previously shot out that I think is still worth asking. If I'm allowed to subvert Joe for just a second here.
By all means.
Favorite Star Trek show and why?
Oh,
Probably not Discovery for anyone. I would be surprised, but still.
I mean, I feel like the obligatory answer is Deep Space Nine, but having watched Babylon 5 at this point, I kind of feel weird saying that given just how close the two were and the circumstances around that. Like, I know they took their own directions, but it's kind of its own thing. The Trek I am enjoying most these days is Lower Decks, definitely. But overall, Deep Space Nine scores very well. Enterprise, for all its failings, has so much potential and has given me such inspiration to explore that.
Yeah, that was the show to me with the most potential that just never really got, And now they don't even reference Archer. Like, they've had all these opportunities to reference Archer, and Archer and company just don't get any love from the new writers.
But there was the Archer shipyard and Discovery retracing the journey made by Jonathan Archer, except for it didn't because it just spore drived into the caves of Kronos and skipped over them.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So, I like Strange New Worlds. I feel like they finally hit their stride in balancing everything they want and also realizing what the viewers want. I used to work in development in Hollywood. I worked for the guy who created Babylon 5 and his partner.
Wow.
I met him, and before I ever worked for him, I met him. I worked for his partner, actually. But I was one of the people who signed his petition when I was a kid about it being Deep Space Nine being too similar to what he had written. And they did see his work. His agent submitted it to Paramount.
Yeah, Strange New Worlds is definitely exceptional.
Yeah,
it's wild to me that Strange New Worlds and Discovery exist at the same time.
Or in that same time period and come from such similar production staff.
Yeah, in our real time, simultaneously, one absolute dumpster fire, and just one. I'm calling it. This is the best Star Trek series that we have.
Well, okay. I think one of the things that was happening was that Akiva Goldsman, who is now, I think, handling Strange New World, and he was one of the he is one of the highest paid screenwriters in Hollywood. The dude's been around forever, right? And I got the distinct impression that he was really being limited by Fuller and the other producers. And so once Discovery sort of imploded, I think they gave him the reins, and I think he knew what to do. That's my impression.
I think my favourites are DS9 and Lower Decks. Lower Decks its humor just comes from a place of love with Star Trek. It isn't mocking Star Trek. It's making fun, certainly, but it's always from a place of we really love Star Trek. Is some of the funnier bits.
Yep. And it's like, sure, here's some of the plot reference. Here's a half a dozen plot references in an episode. But, for a sub 30-minute format, we are still going to give you, a basic core story. We might advance a plot arc and advance characters in another way. But, it is quite sound. I very much enjoy that crew. The embarrassment of duplers will still frequently give me giggles.
Especially Dr. Talana.
Yep.
I applaud that. Isn't Lower Decks going back to Deep Space Nine, or they probably already have at this point?
Lower Decks did go back to Deep Space Nine,
Yes.
and there are
Yep.
plans for a crossover with Strange New Worlds.
That's awesome. That's going to be fun. My ultimate favorite, and I'm kind of in the same thing as you, GM. I absolutely love Babylon 5, and my favorite series is Deep Space Nine. I think a lot of it for Deep Space Nine, it didn't follow the traditional Trek that I was a part of. With Next Generation was the first one that I was introduced to from my dad, and I don't know, just the way it's gritty. Money is still a thing because of the Latinum. We got some the best Klingon story arcs are in Deep Space Nine with House of Quark and Blood Oath, which was great. The several
Don't mention Blood Oath in front of Craig.
I've almost put stuff like that behind me.
But yeah, it's definitely Deep Space Nine. For me, I keep hoping they tease that Michael Dorn has a mini series that he wants to put through, where it's Worf going back to the Klingon Empire as ambassador, kind of retiring from Starfleet, and I think it'd be kind of fun to see that, especially with some of the writing they have with Strange New Worlds and Picard. As long as they keep away from the junk we don't need to be shoved down our throats.
Oh, don't worry. They're not going to touch any of the plot from season 1 or 2 because they know they don't. It's all the trailing ends that scarcely get a mention ever again. The Uber Synth Federation or Empire Eldritch Robotic Abomination, not touching it. The Transwarp Corridor that opened and provisional Borg Federation members, they're not going back to that. We're on whatever hot nonsense is season 3.
That's with most of the cast of the TNG.
Yep.
Except Crusher's not going to be in it like he was in. That was the big, and this is spoiler for anybody who hasn't seen Picard season 2, but that was one of the best cameos ever in Star Trek. Is having him come back.
Yeah.
So what does he come back? It's unlikely they're gonna watch it at this point.
He's as a traveler, he essentially manifests at a point before a character.
Oh, fair. Does everybody know about Wesley Crusher's cameo in Star Trek Online?
Yes.
He's the Terran Emperor. It's just like, what, when, why, how?
Beautiful.
The
Star Trek
Emperor's
Online
will.
just doesn't give a single fucking I love him for it.
Yeah. Well, I guess anything else that any of you would want to put to me just while we still have this moment here.
Yes, when we will meet more Vulcans. They need less makeup budget than Andorians.
We need less Vulcans. Less Vulcans.
We just got a Vulcan, the most awesome one. Kwai Chang Kane, the secret terrorist. We need more.
I'm
More.
pressing X to doubt so hard.
It's
And you know what the thing is here? Romanov has been so accepting of you. And you're not being accepting of another sort of different Vulcan.
Hey. Soral
That's
is very
Soral
accepting.
doing-
Soral is
He
very
just
accepting.
like the other Vulcans, just immediately assuming that he's bad.
Soral is very accepting. Felix has many questions. And I'm looking forward to meeting more Vulcans, especially like Vulcans, because they will have choice words to say about Soral.
the
I do have one question for Jim, which isn't Andorian or Vulcan related. Will we be keeping our second in command, Patel?
So the short answer there is no, and for a little peek behind the curtain for those interested, the player behind them, Drone, had to depart due to real life circumstances. Work issues just got to be a bit much for them, and Drone was a truly great find. I wish him every success, and there's an open seat for him at my virtual table in the future if the opportunity ever emerges. But so far as the character goes, we will be. There is a very graceful exit planned for later on that will be a topic for the next arc as well. And so
Space luck?
I've already worked out what we want to do.
We'll transcend this plane of existence.
Would be a space luck would be a good segue into the first season of TNG.
Yeah, I do not plan on airlocking the current science officer, nor will he be meeting a koala, or the cosmic koala.
A Par-Wraith powered Golden Cat will jump in and zap Patel.
In the near term future, Patel will have I plan to give him a decent story appropriate end. So I would say, for those wondering about that, as well as the imminent presence of Vulcans, Andorians, or Tellarites. Oh my. Definitely stay tuned for when we come back, because there are definite plans in the works. This next episode or set of episodes is going to be a bit of a doozy.
So what you're saying is Azek becomes a traveler and travels between the two ships on Saturdays to be a helmsman for both.
The Klingons are more of a season 2 issue, so we'll worry about that when we get there. That being said, I'm always amenable to a guest star situation if we ever get to it. Just don't expect a crossover. Aegis it does not fundamentally work with crossovers.
We're not going to find out that this is all just a holodeck program, right?
God damn it, Craig! You caught on to my whole thing. I now have to throw out all the notes. Well, it's a good thing I have backup campaign scenarios.
There's a question for you. Which celebrity from Star Trek would you like to join your game for a session?
Oh, God.
Or would you like to play with?
Jeffrey Combs.
Yeah, he could just be all the NPCs.
Yeah. Even just a Shran guest star. I can't think of anyone else I'd rather have. Though legacy characters from Enterprise, by and large, if they happen to show up, then who am I to complain? Let's see. Anything else you guys want to put to me while we still have these waiting few moments here?
I'm out of questions, so I really appreciate the opportunity to join you guys and talk to you guys for a little bit about the game and a little bit about your background and share it with your listeners. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. I do think.
Oh, one more request: more ship role play time. It's fun to interact with crew and daily stuff. That would be fun too. Usually, we have such pressing problems. The sessions get,
Oh yeah, I think we could leave room for at least one more sort of fireside chat or that type of episode in the future. So yeah, I will say that I pretty much have the back half of this season pretty well planned. Um, so I might well whereas we've discussed the order of campaigns from like the sessions from here, I might set an order for this one, and I will beg you to deal with contend with that for just the rest of this particular season, and then when we pick up with season 2, there will be a premiere for that, and then there's a coming plot arc that will grant us a bit more freedom. So that'll be a bit interesting. But until then, yeah, suffice to say, there are a lot of fun things. There's a lot that, as far as things you've expressed interest in seeing more of, that I plan on bringing to the campaign here in the future, and I hope that all of you as players enjoy it, and for those watching, I hope that all of you like to see what we have coming up here. Uh, I guess since we are nearing the end, I may as well take a moment just to drop one other sort of link here. Very specifically, the so far as the campaign goes, just drop a quick link to the YouTube archive where at present all episodes of Aegis and Broken Sword are online and up to date right now. So if you want to come back and check this out, if you want to get into some of the specifics, now is a great time to do so. There's quite a bit to catch up on for either campaign. And yeah, we will, of course, have one more session of Broken Sword coming up before we all break for the holidays this Wednesday at 8 p.m. You can join myself and Joe there, along with the rest of the crew. And yeah, after that, we'll be going to archives. So yeah, by
I have a dream to eventually, at some point, maybe after Christmas, I'd love to guest star in Broken Sword. So,
we
something for the far future.
We could definitely work something out, and we can chat about that later on. But yeah, it's
Oh, and one other shout out. I've really enjoyed the friendship that's been kind of evolving between Yula and Romanov. She considers Yula her best buddy.
Yeah, that's been a lot of fun.
Plus, Yula handles really bad situations well.
We'll see.
So
far, so good.
So far, so good. So, well, listen, I'm going to bow out again. Thanks for running, and I love playing with you guys, and I'm bummed I'm not going to see you guys until after the new year.
Yep.
So,
we'll see around there. And I guess Brian, do you have anything you want to, or rather not Brian, Joe, do you have anything you want to take us out on?
No, come watch us on Wednesday nights for Broken Sword. Big shout out there. Thanks to Modiphius for providing us such a great game to play around with. And if y'all are interested in board games, I do a board game podcast called Overland Gamer Podcast. It's on Spotify and Anchor, and Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, stuff like that. It's basically, I just take a look at board games and share them with people, and we've been adding a little bit of travel in there from time to time, so definitely check those out.
Yep. Link in the description for those of you in the archive. But yeah, well, in that case, this has been fun. It's been nice to have a little mid-season review. We will at least come back with the cast of the Aegis once we are sometime next year, once we get through the second half of the first season of the campaign, and we will, I imagine, be doing the same for Broken Sword as well. But yeah, for all of you joining us here in the archive, and for those that came in live today, we are so grateful to have you stop in. This is where we're going to say goodbye to our YouTube and other archive folks, but we'll talk to you later. Have a good one.